After 4 years of working on my dissertation, the day I finish writing the last piece and I send it off like I'm done, I have this moment where I'm like, I'm going to celebrate. I'm going to Chick-fil-A. I'm going to Chick-fil-A. So I'm driving and I'm thinking about my dissertation. I'm thinking about the 4 years. I'm thinking about writing about toxic leadership, how it silences intentionally and unintentionally, it silences followers. And I'm sitting with this reality that in my dissertation, I get to the end and I have 10 themes that answer my 4 research questions. But of those 10 themes, one theme stands out the most because it answers all 4 of the research questions. No other theme does that. And that theme is self-silencing. Self-silencing. And as I'm driving to Chick-fil-A, I have this moment where I realize I have silenced myself for most of my life. Whether that's because I grew up in a military home, my personality, the way I saw the world, I can go back to the age of 5 and realize that I was silencing myself for my entire life. And so here I am getting this revelation after 4 years of doing this work. This is my dissertation. 653 pages. A third of this is my dissertation. A third of it is the transcript of the 11 interviews I did. And then the last third is the remaining appendix, where I have all this information, including all 4 levels of qualitative coding that I did, and all the codes. And so the question I ask is, what does silencing look like? What does silencing look like? It is multidimensional. And I'm going to go through 3 of those. The first one being personal, because I just shared the story of personal. But when we look at our family of origin, work life, for some military, marriage, church, school, who has shaped your voice the most? Who has silenced your voice the most? How often have you self-silenced? In what ways do you not even realize you have self-silenced or you are self-silencing? Does your voice have freedom or have internal factors or external factors placed a cap on your voice? If you ask the Lord right now, what is the condition of my voice today? What do you imagine that the Lord would say to you? I'm going to continue on with the next dimension, which is the group dimension. And I'm going to share a story from my dissertation. There was a person I interviewed who said for 8 years they attended this specific church. They attended the church 3 times a week for every week for the year for 8 years. And they said when they left the church, 90 to 95% of the people stopped talking with them. Group silence. Some of those people said, well, you didn't get permission from the pastor to leave, or the pastor didn't approve your departure. For me to listen to the brokenness of this person being interviewed and sharing that they did community with these people and none of them wanted to talk to her or her husband. I share that because we are all part of various groups, right? We don't always show up the same in each one of those groups. Your work self is not the same as you are with your parents, family, sports, recreation, church. We may have much of the same, but we're not always the same. And there are a bunch of reasons for that, right? In one context, you may be leading. In another context, you may not be. One context, you may have more social capital than in others. You may have more of a part in one than another. And so we don't always show up in every single group the same. And because of that, groups have an influence on us. And to what degree does the group silence us? Or do we silence ourselves as members of that group? Right? So how do the groups in your life affirm your voice or influence the silencing of your voice? How do these groups contribute to your self-silencing? We talked about personal, we talked about groups. Now I'll talk about organizations. I interviewed someone else, and the brilliance that this person shared was post a very, very horrific experience. While in therapy, they found that they can look back on their life and see the toxic tendencies that they were accustomed to from an early age in the family of origin, from their grandfather. And so then they said, they looked back on their life and saw that they had tendencies to navigate toxic environments because they did that as a child. And almost every single workspace that they worked at, it was the same kind of environment. And then in this church context, right, this person was a leader and they didn't know how to navigate what was happening in terms of the senior leader, senior pastor. And rather than the senior pastor allowing the exposing of what he was doing, he threw this leader under the bus and some other leaders. And what wound up happening was all of the people wound up taking the side of the senior pastor. And it was a horrific experience for this person that I interviewed. Side note, even though the senior pastor was able to get around it being exposed, later on it got exposed. Be that as it may, this specific person that I interviewed, I think this is about 6 years from that time. They don't serve the Lord. They and their family don't even go to church as a byproduct of organizational silencing. So what does silence look like in the organizations that we're a part of? What does silencing look like at work? What does silencing look like in your family, in your household, in your extended family? What does silencing look like in your life? What does silencing look like in your church? What does silencing look like in your school? How does the organization intentionally and unintentionally silence people? What thoughts or words are denied or discouraged from being discussed? Whether it's a written rule or an unwritten rule. And am I complicit in communicating those silencing messages? And how do I feel about that? Even in the midst of this video, what is the Lord speaking to you about where your heart is in this matter? Having been silenced, done the silencing, silencing yourself? Have I self-silenced to survive? Am I still self-silencing? As an organization, are we afraid of dissent? Do we not want truth at all? Or are certain truths discouraged from being said? I wanted to leave you with all of these questions for you to explore it, to find out what's going on in your context. Because as we study all these theories, right? Transformational theory, transformational leadership, full range leadership, servant leadership, how many of these theories ever talk about voice or silence or self-silencing, right? How many of them talk about the environments that squelch truth or squelch dissent or discourage certain things from being said? Silence is multidimensional. I only share 3 of them. There are more, but silence is multidimensional. We experience it, but we also produce it. I want you to think about this in your doctoral journey and in all the areas of your life: family, school, work, church, relationships. How does silencing show up? What does silencing look like? And in what ways may you be snuffing out your voice in a way that God wants to redeem?